Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. This is Tariq Amin, lecturer, Department of English, Cohort University of Science and Technology Cohort. A very warm welcome to the course of Communication Skills. This is video number 1 of the lecture number 22. And in this video, we are going to talk about faults in listening. The lecture outlines include faults in listening, prejudice against the speaker, external distraction, judging negatively, premature evaluation, semantic stereotype, information overload, thinking speed. These were some of the faults in listening. The very first one is prejudice against the speaker. This is very much important point. This is something that always comes in between us and the speaker, and it affects to a large extent our listening process. A common problem that occurs in listening is that of prejudice. That is what we have discussed. This is the very common problem that always comes in between our listening process, that always comes in between we listeners and speakers. And this very point, this very aspect, this very factor affects our listening process. At times, when we listen to different speakers, we have conflict in our mind as to the speaker. Either we are against the speaker or we are not interested in him. That is why we also don't show interest in whatever he or she is saying. Whatever he speaks, because we are prejudiced against the speaker, that is why whatever he speaks seems to be colored to us, because we are prejudiced against the speaker. And as a result, what happens? As a result, we practically don't listen to what he or she says, We do not focus on what is being spoken. These are two very much important things. The first one is who is speaking. When we conversate, we communicate with a particular person. There are always two things. The first one is who is speaking. The second one is what is being spoken, what he or she is talking about. So these are two things. The first one is who is speaking. The second one is what is being spoken. We should always focus upon what is being spoken instead of who is speaking. We should focus on what is being spoken instead of who is speaking. And in case we are prejudiced against the speaker, we don't focus on what is being spoken. Instead, we always concentrate on who is speaking, which is not a good thing for listening process. Sometimes you might have a hard time listening because you do not agree with the speaker. This always happens. Sometimes we listen to different speakers and we don't agree with them. We don't totally don't agree with them, or we don't agree with some of the points of the speaker. This always happens. We as humans have a tendency to be close-minded at times. Sometimes we are close-minded because we are human beings. We are weak. Sometimes we are closed-minded and we don't agree with the speakers. Keep an open mind, but the suggestion is keep an open mind. Always keep your mind open. While you may not agree with the speaker, his or her message may be valid. Yes, it is also important. You might not agree with the speaker. But his or her message may be valid. So you should listen to his message. If you don't agree with them, don't agree with him or her. Just listen to his or her message. His or her message may be valid. Just listen to it. You will never know unless you hear them out. If you don't listen to the speakers, you will never know their messages. You will never know their messages that are valid. So listen to them. Listening is very much important. If you don't listen to them, you will not know their messages. External distractions. External distractions always distracts our listening. It always distracts our listening. The entire physical environment around us affects our listening process. The entire physical environment, our friends, our family members, our children, and each our television, our radio, our cell phones, all these things are external distractions. All these things are the part of physical environment, and all these things affect our listening. So the entire physical environment around us affects our listening process. Among the negative factors are always found in our surrounding environment, and some of the negative factors are noisy fans and poor or glaring lights. Glaring lights are also physical, are also distraction. They distract our listening process. And distracting background music. Background music also distracts our listening. And overheated or cold rooms. If a room is very much cold, it also distracts us. And on the other hand, if the room is overheated, it also distracts our listening. We don't feel comfortable in that very room, and that leads to distractions and a conversation going on nearby, and so on. This also happens when we communicate with our friends, when we communicate with different people, and when we listen to different people. The conversations that are going on nearby also distracts us. For example, if you are listening to your teacher in your classroom, the external distraction, the conversations that are going on outside the classrooms are also the part of external distraction. They are also the part of physical environment. And all these things, noisy fans, glaring lights or poor lights, distracting background music, overheated or cold rooms, and the conversation going on nearby distract our listening process. Distracts our listening. Distracts us from listening. Affect our listening. External distractions are, for example, noise is an external distraction. Classroom doors slamming, these are also external distractions. Cell phones ringing, students having conversations outside in the hall. These are all the examples of external distractions, and these external distractions affect our listening process. In today's world, these cell phones ringing. These cell phone rings are very much common, and they always distract us. If it is your job to check out the speaking situation before you present, so you should always check out the speaking situation before you present something. That way you expect some of the above mentioned outside distractions. You should keep in mind these outside or external distractions. If you have a good idea of what to expect, you can adjust your volume, your pace, your pitch and tone of your speech. You should analyze your speaking situation, and according to the speaking situation that you expect, you can adjust your volume. You should adjust your volume as per the speaking situation. You should adjust your pace, you should adjust your pitch, and you should adjust your tone of the tone of your speech in accordance with the speaking situations. If you are an audience member, you can move to another seat, close the door, and do whatever is necessary to minimize the distraction. If you are speaker, you should adjust your volume, pace, pitch and tone of your speech in accordance with the speaking situation. But If you are not speaker, you are audience. You are an audience member. You are an audience member. What can you do? You can minimize these distractions. You can minimize these external distractions by moving to another seat. You can change your seat. You can go to another seat. You can take another seat. And if it is possible, you can also close the door if there is a conversation going on outside the classroom and that is distracting you. You can close the door in order to minimize this external distraction. And apart from it, you can do whatever that is necessary to minimize the distractions. You should try your level best to keep the external distractions at a minimum. Judging negatively, this is also uh, one of the faults in listening. You should not judge something negatively. Labeling people can be extremely limiting. You should not label people. If you prejudge somebody as incompetent or uninformed, you don't pay much attention to what that person says. So you should not prejudge people. You should not prejudge the speakers. If you prejudge them as incompetent or uninformed, unlearned, or very weak, you won't pay attention to what he or she says. You not pay attention to that. That is why you should not prejudge the people. Don't prejudge speakers. Just listen to them, and after listening to them, you can judge them, but don't prejudge them. If you prejudge them, you will not be able to pay attention to what he or she says, whatever he or she delivers to you. So don't prejudge speakers. A basic rule of listening is that this is the basic rule of listening is that judgment should only be made after you have heard and evaluated the content of the message. This is what I've discussed in the above point, that you can judge the speaker after listening to him, after listening to whatever he or she delivers to you, after listening to the speaker and after listening to the content of the speaker. You can judge him. Judge him and make your comments. Judge them, and you can pass your comments after you have listened to him properly. But if you have not listened to the speaker, if you have not listened to a particular person, it is not a good idea to prejudge him as incompetent or uninformed. Premature evaluation is also one of the faults in listening. Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. This is one of the dilemmas. Most of the people don't listen with the intent to understand. They don't even try to understand. They listen to the speaker in order to reply to them. Their main aim is to reply to them. Their main aim is not to understand whatever he or she, whatever a speaker is saying. It often happens that we interrupt the speakers before they complete their thought or finish their sentence or state their conclusion. This always happen. It often happen. Most of the time, it happens that we as listener interrupt the speakers before they are done with their speech, before they are done with whatever he or she, whatever they had to present. So this should not happen from now on. We should always listen to the speakers. We should let them complete their thought. We should let them complete their sentence. We should let them state their conclusion. After they have completed their thought, after they have stated their conclusion, after they have finished their sentence, we can start and we can take our turn. Directly as a result of our rapid thinking speed, we race ahead of what we feel is the conclusion. We anticipate, we think, we have got rapid thinking speed, and as a result of this rapid thinking speed, we race ahead of what we feel is the conclusion. Premature evaluation. We arrive at the conclusion. We arrive at the conclusion, concluding thought quickly, although often that is quite different from what the speaker intended. We have got rapid thinking speed, and on the basis of that, we arrive at concluding thought very quickly. We reach to the concluding thought very rapidly, and it also most of the time it happens that what we think the concluding thought would be, the concluding point of the speaker would be, it is always, most of the time it is quite different from what the speaker intended. Our thought of our thinking of the concluding statement and the speaker's intended concluding thoughts and concluded statements are most of the time different from one another, from each other. It is the major fault of listening. This is the major fault of listening. The listeners should not jump at the conclusion before the completion of the speech. This is important. It is one of the major faults of listening, and we as speakers should not jump at the conclusions. We should not jump at the conclusion before the speakers have completed their speech. Semantic stereotypes. This is one of the another faults in listening. This happens when the listener willingly attaches some negative meaning to the words of the speaker. When we listen to different speakers, we listen to the different words of the speakers, and sometimes we attach negative meaning to the words of the speaker that we listen. And a certain kind of people bother us, so do the same. So to do certain words, like when we meet people in our daily life, some of the people bother us. Same is the case with certain words. When we hear certain words, when we listen to certain words, they bother us. Same is the case with words too. And when these words are repeated time and again, they are repeated again and again, and they cause they annoy us. And effective listening is impaired when we listen to such words that bother us, they annoy us, and as a result, they affect our listening process. Information overload. It occurs when you have much information coming at you. It is easy to become overwhelmed. This information overload also affects our listening process. When lots of information coming at you, you get bored very soon. You become overwhelmed. In a public speaking class, you can experience this when listening to your fellow classmates give speeches, especially if you are hearing 20 speeches one after the other. If you hear 20 speeches or more than 20 speeches one after the other, definitely you will get bored. Thinking speed. Most of us speak between 60 to 80 words per minute. This is sure that most of the people speak between 60 to 180 words per minute. Some people speak at the rate of 60 words per minute, some speak at the rate of 100 words per minute, and some speak at the rate of 180 words per minute. And people have the capacity to think at the rate of 5 to 800 words per minute. We all have, most of us have the capacity to think at the rate of 5 to 100 words per minute. So there is huge difference between our thinking speed and our speaking speed. The average speaking rate is about 125 words per minute, while the brain has the capacity to understand average 400 words or more. There is difference between our thinking speed and our speaking speed, and the difference leaves us with a great deal of mental spare time. So we have lots of spare time for thinking. While it is possible to use this time to explore the speaker's ideas, we most often let our mind wander to other matters, from the unfinished business just mentioned to romantic fantasies. So our thinking speed, uh, there is difference between our thinking speed and our speaking speed. As a result, the difference leaves us with a spare time. It leaves us with a great deal of mental spare time, and in that mental spare time, we start thinking about other things. And when we start thinking about other things, most of the time we reach at the conclusion before the speaker has finished with his or her statement, with his or her presentation. These are the references: Effective Business Communication by Herta A. Murphy, 7th edition. Thank you very much for listening to the video. Allah Hafiz.